I imagine there'll be some questions or other comments from these guys. They're the smart ones. I'm just the entertaining one who wears the loud shirts.
Please.
Wow. Bound to fail today.
Welcome back, all you almost perfect people, to the podcast. We have been so hit and miss over the last few weeks, and I bet most of that has been my fault. But here we are, and guys, I think we are coming back with fire this week, let me tell you. And as much as I want to talk about 17-pound potatoes, astronauts wearing diapers, and cocaine hippos, before I do any of that, I have to say hello to this wonderful group of people that are here with me. And also Wade. Wade, how are you doing this morning, brother?
Well, I was doing good till then. Wow.
And Wade's here, and so is Tom. Tom, how have you been over there in that one spot that you're not leaving?
I'm doing well. I'm outside as usual. It's a wonderful, absolutely marvelous day. Too bad you guys are pastors and you have to be in your office. So,
yeah, what can I say? And then, guys, we are joined today by a special guest this week who almost looks like, with the green background, like you're doing like a video series or something. All you gotta do is take down those pictures and you can put whatever backdrop behind you, be good to go. Lizzie Wright is joining us this week. Lizzie Wright, how the hallelujah are you?
I'm good. I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for having me. And yes, I have caught flack the entirety of the pandemic for this wall. It is legitimately the color that our dining room was before COVID even came on the scene. And these are windows from First GMC Austin.
Oh, awesome. Very good. Very good. Well, welcome to the podcast, Lizzie. Like we told you before, keep things serious because that's the only way we know how to go.
Yeah.
And with that in mind, we're going to laugh that the astronauts in SpaceX, when they come back, they're going to have to be wearing diapers. They've been in space for 200 days. They broke the toilet up there, and they're going to have to wear diapers for the rest of their space travels.
Wow.
I mean, you know how hard it is to get a plumber these days, throw in space travel, and it's just that much more difficult.
I have so many quips that I can't say.
You don't want to, or you'll save for later.
So John, did you know my brother is one of the astronaut doctors?
I remember you told me that. Yeah.
Yeah. I just we were going to meet up tomorrow, but just got a text from him. He's been spending this past week up in one of the national parks with trekking with his astronauts. He's the doc on present with them as they're going through their training. Wow. Survival training or whatever. They were up in Utah in one of the national parks, so wherever the Pueblos are.
Well, you tell him to tell them we're thinking about them. And I haven't quite figured out the sermon illustration yet, but I will, by golly.
I wonder which one of those knuckleheads broke the bathroom. That's gonna
live on in infamy, right?
Yeah.
Can you imagine these guys and gals around, the dinner table one day, passing stories? Well, you remember the time so-and-so broke the only toilet on the space camp. That's not the reputation I want, but anyway. Besides that, guys, how have you all been? We haven't been together in a while. What's been going on? What have you been doing that has made your day? Tell everybody what's brought you joy over the last few weeks.
Usually for me, it's the beach. My dog's running around here somewhere. He loves to go to the beach.
Yeah, I saw it.
Yeah.
I saw the tail going.
Yeah, that's
back.
his tail. It's not mine.
Yeah.
It's not yours? Yeah, that's right. I think we talked about that before. You're discreet with your tail, Wade. You tuck it in. And
quite discreet, yeah. Well, it's not as black and bushy as his either. So.
Very good. I've seen some of your pictures when you go to the beach. It's usually just you, right? When you go out there?
Man, that is my quiet time. I go out there to read, and I only have to throw the ball for him about 5 times an hour, and then he's tuckered out and he just lays next to me. And I always find the most isolated spot on the beach that I can find and hang out.
Good for you, man.
Which beach do you go to?
I go out to beach access road number 2.
0.5.
It's Mustang Island, but I think it's around mile markers like 108 to further. I don't know. I just drive out where there's sand. I drive out to the sand
And just stop before you get to the water.
exactly most of the time. Yeah.
So Lizzie, what's been filling your time lately? How have you been?
Speaking of dogs, I dog sit as a side gig. I don't know if you know that nonprofit work isn't much more lucrative than pastoring. I dog sit on the side and I love it. I've always loved animals. My parents are both pastors. And so I've been used to going around and visiting people in their homes and getting to see their animals of all sorts, especially when I was a kid and we lived in the hill country. So it's kind of like that, or it's kind of like being an aunt, right? And I love being an aunt. You get to play and have fun, and you do a little bit of taking care, and then you're like out after a couple of nights or whatever, right? Like, or you get to drop the kids back off. So I usually stay at the dog's house, and I had a little gig this weekend, and that was fun. And then I had a lot of fun for Halloween. I have wanted, you can't really tell right now, because it's already washing out, but I've wanted to dye my hair my whole life. I am 36 years old, and my parents put the fear in me as a child that like I could not even get like a spray of color at the carnival kind of thing. And it's all tied to this story about when my dad dyed his hair in high school. And anyway, the myth has lived within me these 36 years. And I finally was like, I'm a real grown up. I get to do what I want. I'm dyeing my hair, but it turned out more red than I wanted. So I dressed up as my niece for Halloween because she has auburn red kind of hair like my sister. And it was the most fun. Like, it was just so much fun to think through like how to be Esme. Plus, Esme is a hilarious and clever little girl. And so it was just really fun. It was also funny though to go through the neighborhood trick-or-treating with them, and all 3 kids were Winnie the Pooh characters. And so people were like, are you supposed to be Christopher Robin? And I was like, no, I'm my niece. It's a very inside joke happening
Very much.
right now, but I had fun with it.
Good for you. Good for you. So like, as you're dyeing your hair for the first time in your life, like, how are you getting over the feelings? How are you repressing that anxiety through all that?
I know this should have made sense all along the way, but I'm like, everyone else is always worried about covering up their dark roots, whereas I was trying to go darker. And I was like, the hair grows out. Like, I just had to keep telling myself, the hair grows out. The hair grows out. But I will tell you, my dad's pictures in high school, he's blonde, and he dyed his hair for a play to be the father. They wanted him to have darker hair with some gray put into it too. And you see pictures of him once he's in seminary, which is he went straight through college and then straight into seminary. So 4 years later, and his hair looks darker. I mean, his hair looks as dark as John's. So John Fletcher's on here. So it's like, it is this weird mind game of like, what happened with his hair? But I just had to keep being like, the hair grows out. The hair grows out.
It'll be all right eventually, right? Wade, did you dress up at all?
Sort of. We had trunk or treat, and I'm not really a very good planner. So I wore a Batman shirt and a Panama hat, and I called myself Retired Batman.
It works, man. It works.
It was fine.
Gotham's okay, take a break, right?
Yeah.
What about you, Tom?
Gotham on the beach.
There you go. There it is. Tom, what about you?
Actually, this was one of the few times I went fishing, and it's always been a 3-day trip, but in the past I was only there for 2 days. So Halloween, at least Halloween morning, I was out on the Laguna Madre and dressed as a fisherman. And I wish I had, it would be more like the luckless fisherman. The one thing though, I did catch something that everybody said, what is that? And, this happened over a week ago. And today we finally got the answer. It's like nobody had ever seen one of these before. And it's like, it turns out it's a lizard fish. It's an ugly looking little fish, but interesting. So that, I had my Gilligan's hat on that I only can wear going fishing, or else my wife will throw it away. So she absolutely hates it.
If you dress up as a fisherman, but then catch fish, you haven't actually dressed up or done any costuming. You are a fisherman.
It's just who you are.
I don't even think it counts.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was Mr. Potato Head and Gloria was Mrs. Potato Head. And let me tell you guys, I am trunk or treated out. My mom and my youngest sister came and brought to my 3 nieces, and they came on Thursday night, and we wanted to just, they were here for the Halloween weekend. So we wanted to do it up. So we went to a trunk or treat, 2 of them on Friday. We went to a couple of them on Saturday. We went to a couple of them on Sunday, and we went trick or treating. I'm done with that for a while, guys. That was a lot. It was fun, but it was a lot. It was a lot of candy left over too. I don't know what happened to it all. So
I was thinking at our house, we had the doorbell ring once, and I don't know how many kids, because I wasn't the one who answered it, but I was, I'm just surprised at actually how little kids actually get out and go through our neighborhood. Even our next door neighbor who said, yeah, we're coming over, never came over. So
wow.
We were all ready for them, and they never showed up.
I see.
So I've got lots of Tootsie Rolls. You need any Tootsie Rolls?
I'm always in need of a Tootsie Roll, bro.
And just swing on by.
My sister was quite pleased because when we went out trick-or-treating in our neighborhood, somebody gave out margaritas.
Really?
She said, I like that house. Can I go back?
I need to know where that neighborhood is next year.
So anyway, all right. So glad you had a good time. Glad you're all well. Glad we're able to come together. We, just as a reminder, we started this, like 2 years ago, something like that, just to kind of be able to touch base together. But also we wanted to have sort of meaningful conversation for our churches and for us as church leaders that needed to be had, that maybe weren't being had, at least in a regular way. And we want to have a little bit of fun with it. And part of that today is we have a good conversation. That's why we brought Lizzie along. We asked her to come on because as good United Methodist Christians, we love a good acronym. And Lizzie, you're all about acronyms over there. Can you tell us what's your acronym?
Like, sorry, I was going to make a stupid joke. Are you talking about JFON, I assume?
Yes.
So JFON is the affectionate way we pronounce our acronym. It stands for Justice for Our Neighbors, and it's a United Methodist immigration ministry that really has roots even before 1999, when it officially became Justice for Our Neighbors nationally. Before that, it was called Just Neighbors, and that is what one of our affiliate chapters still calls themselves. But Justice for Our Neighbors comes out of UMCOR's work with disaster relief, recognizing that there are people who get displaced who won't be able to go back home, or whose home just basically doesn't exist as it was, or whose home is not safe, at least for now, and need somewhere to be safely and legally. And then that grew into recognizing that there are all kinds of dynamics and not just natural disasters that drive people to seeking home in another place, or safety at least in another place. And so then that's how the United Methodist started to do this ministry more officially in 1999. And now there are 19 chapters, I think, because El Paso opened, which is great. So yeah, we in Austin do some very specific work, but I don't have to launch into that just yet if you don't want to. But Justice for Our Neighbors, and I like the name. The network is considering a name change. I mean, it's likely that they'll change the network's name, but we may still keep our title within it as an affiliate. I like it because I think, especially for Christians, and that's a huge part of our supporter network, those words, justice and neighbor, code a lot right there. And while it doesn't say in the name immigration legal services or immigration advocacy for systemic change, I think justice codes some of that, and neighbor says a lot. And we could narrow it down maybe more, but I think there's something poetic about the name that's worth keeping. So that's where we are. Justice for Our Neighbors. Very good.
And how long have you been associated with them?
I came on as the first executive director in the Austin chapter in March of 2019. So again, what is time? I'm not I'm not quite, but that's my motto of the pandemic. What is time? It both seems, I don't know if there are any Jesus Christ Superstar fans. It's like, seems like 90 sometimes, seems like 30, but then also I think, how has it already been? I mean, I'm starting to round out 3 years when I hit March 1st, and that's weird. That's weird.
And what got you connected to JFON? Was it, how did you find yourself in that position? And what kind of joy do you get out of what you're doing there?
So for those who don't know, I am United Methodist clergy, and I served in the local church, and John's had to suffer with me for a good long while now because we were in residency together.
That's right. We were ordained the same year. That's
yes.
right.
So I was an associate for a couple of years in Smithville, and then was sent to be a solo pastor in Edinburgh in the Rio Grande Valley, and I was there for 4 years, and then in Weslaco in the Mid Valley for 2 years. And it was an interesting season that I think kind of built on some things similar to how I felt my call to ministry. And I don't call them red flags. I say that, the point that I was discerning my call, I feel like I looked backwards and saw all of these white flags of surrender that I just walked right past, right? Like that I just kind of ignored and went past. I think a lot of things in my life, including those appointments, were preparing me to see how this could be a really important step in my call to take into this role. So in the Rio Grande Valley, I was there, I got there in 2013. And that was one of the seasons in 2014 that there was an increase in unaccompanied minors. I had a couple of encounters myself, a young man who basically could see the steeple from wherever he was dropped off by his coyotes, and knew a church was a safe, or believed a church was a safe place to go, showed up in the middle of praise band practice. And at that point, my Spanish was still kind of garbage Spanish of high school. It's just kind of the stuff you repeat, yo hablo to alas, and was not as conversational as it needed to be. But, we used some Google Translate on the phone and sorted some stuff out, and just getting him into the kitchen that's off the sanctuary space, drinking some water because he desperately needed some water for sure, and kind of trying to figure out what's next in the most helpful way, without overstepping or believing I knew what was next. He started singing along to the praise band songs in Spanish. He knew a couple of, there were a couple of songs that were familiar to him. And that was a really holy moment to share in that space, and stuck with me. And then just, encounters with young people in my ministry who meant a lot to me, and whose lives, were testaments to how strong they are and how open they are to God working in their lives, who were DACA recipients and who were panicked when that was paused for a time about what that would mean. And if they could get, while there was an injunction on that pause on the program, could they get protection in the meantime? They could get their packets in, and fearful about the money that it cost, though, and what attorneys were asking them to pay to be sure they could get that renewed before the injunction might go away, and therefore the program might go away. And then living in Weslaco, I don't know if this is okay to say as a pastor, but I used to go about once a month with a friend across the border to get a beer and get my nails done. And one of the times coming back was the first time I'd ever, in crossing back and forth, encountered, they put basically like just a standalone piece of chain link fence in the middle of the bridge. And my friend, who's actually of Italian descent, was stopped and asked for her documentation, and not me and not any of the other white-haired folks going past that spot. And that's not how it works to cross. I don't know if anyone listening doesn't know that, but you usually you get to the port of entry after you've gotten across the bridge. There's a sign in the middle that says, this is the middle of the river right here, but there's nothing that happens in the middle of the river. And that was the beginnings of the migrant protection protocol, essentially the Remain in Mexico policy. And so kind of seeing that firsthand and being bewildered and thinking this isn't how it goes, and then starting to process, the whole point of this is so folks don't, like, in international law is that you go to a port of entry and ask for asylum or ask for help or express fear. And so the idea was if they can't get to American soil to ask for it, then we aren't obligated to follow through. And these things started to process. Also, the soldiers who were stationed at Christmas time to put up concertina wire were in Weslaco. And, I had a member who'd been in Vietnam who was having a real horrible time with the fact that the lights were on all night, that he could hear the generators going from where he was, stuff like that. And so all of those things kind of collided in a very specific way in that time, but that all built on, I went to college to study history and public policy. I wanted to go to Washington. I wanted to do a very top-down version of changing the world. And when I felt my call to ministry, it was one of my old high school friends who said, I mean, this doesn't, I thought she was going to talk me out of it. I thought she was going to be like, yeah, no, don't do this. You've seen your parents' life. And instead she was like, yeah, this totally makes sense. And I was like, it does? Are you sure? She was like, yeah, I mean, you have always wanted to make the world more what you think God has wanted it to be. You just are looking at it from grassroots now instead of top down. And so that's what I mean in part by things just kind of colliding. Austin got a grant to hire an ED. It was at the right time where I was kind of doing some wondering about what next steps might be in ministry. And so I applied, and they were foolish enough to hire me. So
Amen. So a follow-up question to Tom. Tom, have you ever had to cross the border to get your nails done?
No.
No. Okay. I didn't think so. Very good. He has his own spot here in Corpus. Very good. So Lizzie, Lizzie gave us the idea about having a conversation around at least three related topics: mercy, and justice, and charity. For those of you who are listening, I don't know how many church meetings you've been a part of or conversations, but some of this is kind of controversial in the church, like mixing justice with charity, and that's not the church's job, and all this kind of stuff. I don't know if Wade or Tom, if you've had any of that kind of experience, but so if you would, if you'd be willing to lead us around some of that, Lizzie, and along the way, guys, Wade, Tom, if you have any questions, jump in. Let's kind of talk about why this is meaningful work, and other work that may be related to it for the churches for our churches to consider within their realm of ministry.
Yeah, well, let's talk about the idea that, yes, this is or let's just approach what you just said, that this ends up being controversial despite justice being something in Scripture, something God's pretty clear about many times over, and mercy too, right? And where does charity, I mean, I know we can, whatever, we can pull out word study kind of stuff and like charity related to caritas and care and the heart and all of that, but our modern concept of charity, that can also have a bad rap in the church. It can both be the place that churches want to stay, the location they want to stay in, right? Is kind of the work of like, we give you a little bit of stuff and send you on your way, right? Mm-hmm. And then it also can be a bad word. It can be a handout. It can be, people should be helping themselves kind of thing. And that's where I'd say, well, we still are looking at the need for justice work then, because what if the system doesn't let you help yourself? I mean, I would argue with all of that anyway, but so I guess I've talked enough already, even just about my work for this little stretch. I'm curious what experiences y'all have with pushback on either of those, where people are upset about mercy, kind of immediate. Well, that's the way I define it. Maybe I should say that. For me, I think of mercy and justice, the reason God pairs them together so often is one of them is kind of more immediate, that we need to be merciful. And certainly mercy has way more that you can dig into in its meaning. I mean, the way that God is merciful with us, but I still think God's mercy isn't just tied to like this idea of not punishing us. I think God's mercy is tied to everything we have belongs to God and is not ours to act like, was always ours and generated only from us, right? So things are part of God's mercy. Provision is part of God's mercy in my mind. And so to me, the two are paired together in this idea of like, yeah, we reach people's immediate needs. Jesus feeds the 5,000, but also Jesus is looking to upend some systems of injustice in the meantime too. That are keeping people needing to come get bread, right? So I think the two go together. But how have y'all experienced that, either in good situations where you see people kind of pairing the two together, or when have there been hard times and pushback on that?
I think, just living in South Texas, when you often when you begin to talk about the border, um, it often shifts right into a political debate. Um, and, uh, um, and, you know, I don't typically engage in those conversations. I kind of want to move that discussion to, you know, maybe there are some things around justice and mercy that that supersede our political leanings, or just the desire to talk about this in a political light rather than talk about it in light of humanity. And so, you know, most of the time, I haven't had any like really hot conversations that got out of hand about border things. I have had some people, you know, just not want to engage, but trying to flip that to let's talk about what's going on with humanity. I think typically you can, if you can get people to put aside some of the talking points that they hear from their favorite side of the political spectrum, and just begin to talk about what's human, I think it can shift some of the conversation. You know, I think a lot of times what happens is people have a hard time reconciling the two things. And so they just will say something like, or get to the place of, this is just a hard issue that we can't solve. And so I think it becomes, at least in discussions I've had, it becomes less about trying to come to some agreement about these issues, and more of a, this is impossible. So I think I'm either going to try to tackle that, or I just don't even want to go there at all.
And I want to be clear, you know, we don't have to stay focused on immigration related and immigrant related conversation. I think of food pantries, that's a place where in every church I've served, there becomes inevitably a discussion that touches on this idea of meeting people's immediate needs, but also what's going on with the system that people need food in the first place. And are we as a church going to try to tackle that somehow? Or, you know, should we be celebrating that we served more people at the food pantry this year? In one way, if they needed the food, sure, but also, are we actually excited that 200 more people received food from us? Because are we excited? I mean, shouldn't we want to put ourselves out of business as a food pantry, right? Like
our food pantry, I hadn't thought about it this way, but they distribute food 2 days a week, and I'll come in sometimes and I'll go, how's it going? And they're like, man, we're really slow today. I'm kind of like, well, that's good, isn't it?
Right.
Yeah.
But it's not, you know, it is good, and I think they get that, but it sort of shines a light on at least a little bit. There's a sense in which we exist to distribute food, maybe not so much to alleviate hunger. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think it ties in exactly with what Lizzie was saying before. You know, my experience, most of this kind of sort of ends at the charity level, where what can we do right now? And with good intentions, right? You know, there's a need. All right, let's bring socks, right? Let's go read to children, right? Let's do that thing. But then I have had myself anyway, very little success to be able to, all right, let's go a little bit further, right? Because then you start talking about systems, and I don't know, particularly over the last several years, it feels like that's like a dirty word. Like if you're going to say that there are systems that may be at play that are keeping people down, and like that offends people, which is beyond me. It shouldn't offend. I don't think it should offend the Christian heart, because I mean that's scripture, isn't it? That there are systems at place. There are powers at play against us, and we need to be able to recognize that. But yeah, most of the work I've ever been a part of at church level has really just been that immediate need. Tom, what about you?
I was just thinking, Lizzie, you mentioned Spanish. How's your Spanish now?
mucho más mejor, pero necesito aprendiendo más y practicar, o necesito, yeah, practicar mucho más. I need to practice a lot more, but it's a lot better.
And why is it better?
Because when I was a pastor, Spanish people who were primarily speaking Spanish and maybe had some English words would come to speak to me about any number of things. And what I will say is Spanish speakers were very kind, very generous, and very patient, and very encouraging of me to go ahead and try in a way I generally don't see from English speakers when someone's trying out in English, which if you ask me is a way harder language. My joke, I always, to put people at ease, because they're standing in front of a woman who's carrying a lot of power, right? I've got pastor or reverend in front of my name, and that carries a lot of weight with people. Sometimes not. I don't know. You know, being a woman sometimes doesn't carry a lot of weight with people, but and in that particular context, I carry a lot of power by being white. I carried a lot of power by being blonde and blue-eyed. And that's, I'm not saying that's how it should be, but that was something I learned was a reality I needed to be really conscious of. And so I try to put people at ease by reminding them that I think Spanish is beautiful, that the rules are the rules for the most part. And I also say, and the sounds are the sounds. My example is always the city next to Wesco is Mercedes, right? And I'd say, okay, por ejemplo, for example, in inglés or in español, Mercedes, una letra E y, you know, un sonido, Mercedes. Pero en inglés, ay, qué feo, Mercedes, 3 sounds for
That's
one
great.
letter, and it's so
Yeah.
ugly sounding compared to Mercedes, you know. So that puts folks at ease. And then, but even before that, they're so kind about trying. So conversation and just trying and having people gently correct me. I've dated a couple of Spanish speakers. And they are also kind and just excited that I'm trying. And so conversation. And then also I'll just put this little plug in. JFON did a fundraising event this year, more than one, a long season of events. We volunteered at Austin FC, which is the new MLS soccer team, first major league sport in the city of Austin. And so Austin FC, we ran the Plucker stand for the whole season at home. And I had volunteers, wonderful volunteers, about 40 volunteers throughout the season, but not all at once. And so, so we had temps sometimes too that would fill in on the team to make it a full team of 8 or 9. And most of them are Spanish speakers. I had 2 games in a row where there were two French speaking men who were speaking in Spanish.
Wow.
In what they could, and me trying to get my Spanish back to them. And you know, I didn't probe, but my guess is it's not just that those languages are related as Romance languages, but my guess is those 2 men were from the west coast of Africa, and I'm going to guess they were in detention for a while and learned Spanish in detention, because that happens. Because that's just my little tidbit I'm taking for granted that you might know this. Almost any male who comes on his own or with family from West Africa will be detained for some amount of time. It's just kind of a blanket thing that you don't have to have committed any crimes. It's just a thing that happens. So
Wow, I did not know that.
Yeah.
So my Spanish got a lot. I can tell you all about wings and
What? Wings?
pepinos. Sí. También sin hueso, con hueso, no. You want boneless or bone-in wings, right?
I was gonna say, Tom, you look quite confused right there.
Well, no, what I'm going to come back to though is there is the Spanish you learn in school because it's a class, and then there's the Spanish you learn because you're in relationship with people.
Exactly.
And you know, believe it or not, my Spanish is poorer, even though I grew up in South Texas and took all these Spanish classes. But my Russian is at least I can get along in a Russian situation. I can understand what's going on. And the difference is I lived in Russia. I was among Russians. I learned their culture. I learned when they laughed. I also understood what it was like to walk. I looked Russian to the point that somebody who asked me to take a picture at their wedding, and I understood that they were asking me to do it the moment I said, you know, sure. they go, "Oh, sorry, we didn't know you were American." You know, that kind of situation. But when we talk about let's say the food pantry is Spanish in class. But to take it the next step is, and this is to sit down with those at the food pantry and have a meal. That's moving into relationship. That's beginning to learn what is actually happening. You know, the things that you're telling us. You know, we're going. We didn't know that, or I didn't know that. I didn't know that about West African males being detained. I knew that there were some who had hardships and stuff. If you'd asked me, just not because of out of experience, but just an assumption. But when you're in relationship, then it is more than just simply crossing the border. These are real people with real stories, and mercy, compassion, all of those things get stirred because there's something inside of us that wants to make a difference. And that's because, you know, if we are followers of Jesus Christ, we look at the scriptures and we see that Jesus is constantly, he is avoiding the political solution over and over again. He's, you know, the zealots want him to, you know, do this, and the religious leaders want him to keep the rules and keep your, you know, keep your disciples in line. And he's pushing all of the boundaries. But the reason he's doing that, and you know, the message of the gospel is that the kingdom is at hand, and the kingdom means things are not going to be the way they were. We get upset, especially every 4 years when there's all of this going on during a presidential election, because we know something is going to change, and we want our, you know, we believe that if this person is elected, you know, this one will keep the status quo. This one will upset the apple cart, and we look at each political position as this is, you know, this one's the right one, this is the wrong one. My goodness, let's all fight about it. Whereas, you know, doing what you did, Lizzie, living in a community, learning the community, actually having your eyes open to what's happening by one young man who came into the church, and it just completely rewrites the narrative. And that's why when we're talking about all of this, I just go, you know, if you've lived in another culture, you have a greater respect for the diversity of cultures. And you know, I moved from, you know, in Russia, 3 months of darkness and cold and miserable food and bad smells to, oh, I love this culture. I love how they celebrate. They keep me up at midnight on New Year's Eve a lot better than my culture does. I want to go to bed at 10, but they have a way of celebrating that transition. So that's.
Oh, you've hit on so much. Oh my gosh. I mean, you're sparking thought after thought after thought. And I think even working from just this spot right here, right? I think each thought you're sparking for me still kind of comes back to vulnerability and uncomfortability, right?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Whew. And have y'all had to talk with your congregations about that before? Because I feel like that was a season of preaching on my part, you know, I mean, kind of that afflicting the comfortable and comforting the afflicted sort of thing that, guess what, people didn't like to hear. But that I was, as you were talking, and first saying, you know, that you loved being in Russia, I was like, right, but I bet there was a season that it wasn't comfortable at first. There was
no,
that
not at all. No.
Adjusting, having to be okay with things that you're not comfortable with. I think, you know, I had a lot of people when I was appointed to the Valley who were like, well, best wishes kind of thing, you know, like good luck with that. And I know I don't want to discount anyone's very hard experiences, but I'm also thinking some people just have hard experiences in a congregation because it's the congregation and it's not the place. And unfortunately, it all gets tied together. But I remember people acting like going to the valley was just going to the moon practically. And I was like, cool, I've wanted to be an astronaut. I can't wait to get to the moon. This is cool. Like, so we can come back to the astronaut conversation, because I literally had that astronaut ambition like into high school. That was not something I just had as like a little kid. But I think maybe partly from growing up in a pastor's family, I had to learn early on, when we move, there's always something good and there's always something hard, is the way I say it. And not just something bad, but there's always something hard. There's always something good. And so even the place you think is going to be the dream appointment, there's going to be something hard about that. And so I think, getting over that barrier of uncomfortability is the hard part, though. So sticking with it long enough to reach that point of being able to say, oh, yeah, this is really beautiful. And this has really changed me and helped me to see some things in me that needed to change, and also helped me understand myself better. All of those beautiful things that happen from letting yourself be vulnerable and uncomfortable and immersed in something that is different from what you're used to.
That applies on with so many different things, different kinds of experiences or ministry or whatever else, right? So Lizzie, in the last few minutes we have, would you let's talk to, the regular person who goes and sits in the pew and listens to people like us talk on in all the time. What is the relationship? What is a good understanding of the relationship between mercy and compassion and justice and charity? These things that you've brought up so far.
So I kind of alluded at the beginning. I think of charity and mercy being kind of tied together, but I can also, depending on the day, talk about how incredibly different they are. But the way that we use the word charity right now is usually kind of a much more immediate thing, something that's meeting an immediate need. The charities that you think of, even in that use of the word, is reaching to people's immediate needs in order to give them some mercy in their life, to lift a burden, right? And that's where we can tie it to that concept of like Christ lifting a burden, the mercy of God and forgiveness of lifting that burden of sin from our shoulders. I think, whatever, and don't analyze that phrase too much, then like check that with theologians who might say that's not the precise way to describe that, but I think that's how people can feel about it sitting in the pew, I hope, is that a burden's been lifted from them because of who Christ is and what he does for us, not what we do. But then that's what prompts the mercy from us, right? The grace received, we don't earn it, but we do something with that gift, right? That's the way I was taught, literally by my parents who were my pastors, was otherwise grace is sitting on a shelf collecting dust. So what do you do with it when you've received God's grace? And that's the mercy then we give on to others. But if you sit with the life of Jesus for very long, and really let yourself sit in it and not just inject what you want, you hope Jesus is saying to you, hope Jesus is doing. If I go back to that story, and this is something else that Tom reminded me of, if I go back to the idea of the feeding of the 5,000, they come to Jesus and want to make him king, right? A political thing. Jesus wants nothing to do with it. It doesn't mean that he doesn't care about politikos, though, the life lived together. That's what that all comes back to, is how do we live life together? Politics, the way we talk about it now, right? That doesn't sound like that, but he cares about the life lived together. That's his point, is like, you're missing the point if you want to make me king, if you think that the system is going to fix it, because the system needs fixing. The system shouldn't have to be there if we were to live the way God originally created the system to be. The system was to be loving one another and loving God. And if we do that well, you don't need a king to provide the bread for you, because you're sharing your bread with each other already, right? So that's where the justice comes in of like, listen, it takes me back to Isaiah always. I think of Isaiah being like, listen, you can burn as many bulls as you want, but it's bull if you turn right back around and take advantage of the poor by charging them more for oil so they can't eat, by charging them more for flour so they can't eat, that's where I think, and maybe I'm worried I'm not talking to the person in the pew, like you were saying, John, but what are we doing to make sure that that the system isn't keeping people trapped looking for a king, and instead they're following the true Lord and King of our lives in such a way that you don't have to look to the king, a worldly king, an earthly king anymore for help. You don't need to prop someone up in place as your hero every 4 years and claim that that's the only person who can save us all from whatever was the previous 4 years, et cetera, et cetera. But you're able to say, listen, there's something wrong right now, and there's something wrong we need to fix so that that doesn't keep happening. And I think we've got story after story in scripture. It's not even just Jesus. We've got Joseph's life. And by the way, I'm going to hurt myself if I don't get this out while I have a chance with y'all, but you can barely get, 3 chapters at the most, 3 chapters maybe into scripture between a story about someone migrating, and another story about someone migrating, and not just, because God called them to go somewhere, but like Joseph was trafficked. People were put in forced labor. Besides
famine, everything else.
Exactly. Essentially, you can say famine is like a climate migrant, right? A migrant of climate change, so to speak, right? And so, but take Joseph, not just that he was a migrant. Joseph is seen as a leader and a gift from God, because not just of his dreams, but the way that his dreams then help him lead to set up a system that's going to help people, right? And then they even welcome people from other lands because they've planned ahead. They've got a system that's going to provide for people, because they've planned ahead. And they're going to meet some immediate needs, but it's all, the system and the immediate are tied together. Justice and mercy are tied together. You can exhaust yourself on mercy, but if you're not pursuing justice, eventually I think that's why people turn away. They get tired of it. They think,
same thing.
Yeah, we tried that.
Yep.
We tried that, and people just kind of took advantage of it, or whatever excuse they're going to say. And I think some of that is because, to get back again to something Tom said, that investment of time, the vulnerability of relationships, I think that's a conversation we're having in our congregations all the time too, right? And on that language could be used for any number of ways. We're talking to congregants. We're not just going to throw a block party and have fun, with folks and then assume we've done our part because we did this.
We're done.
Investment of time. We'll need to build relationships with people for them to really be invested in having a relationship with Christ. And so, vulnerability and time, that was also related to the language thing, right? I was scared to get something wrong, so I didn't want to say the wrong thing. But once people made it safe for me to get the words wrong and made it clear I wasn't dumb for that, then it became safer and safer to try. And that's partly how we built relationship too. Someone made it safe to be vulnerable. And I think, I don't know if I've tied that together neatly, but all of those dots are around to create a picture of what I'm trying to say.
No, as I was listening, I think that, your word that doesn't sound right to those in the pew. I think it actually does. I think it makes sense, because there's something that needs to be done now, but there's also a larger picture of the need that people have. And I like to encourage our church, it's important when we do, some of these activities we're serving, it's, we need somebody on one side of the table to serve the food as necessary, but we also need more people on the other side of the table to go sit down and just talk. And, Wade, I think you talked about this a couple of weeks ago with pumpkins, right? Who cares how much money we can make from the pumpkins? What if it's a chance that we actually get to connect with a neighbor, like a literal neighbor of ours, right? And find out what struggles they have or what joys they have, and how our lives are already connected in ways that we probably don't realize. So I appreciate all that, Lizzie. I'm sure we could go on, and maybe we need to have you back soon so you can finish the conversation or add more to it. In the meantime, make sure you check out JFON and what they're doing. Y'all spent quite a few weeks there selling pluckers, didn't you?
Oh my goodness, yes. And they're already saying they want to invite us back, and that's both exciting because it means we did a good job, but also like, oh Lord, when does the season start? And please give me strength. But check us out at jfonaustin.org. Also, if this is an uncomfortable spot, if you've been listening and that's because you love Tom or Wade or John, or you just put up with them and listen to this, and me bringing up the border or immigrants or men from West Africa being detained is uncomfortable. I really I know that's an uncomfortable spot. It's a vulnerable spot to be in. I want to be in relationship. I don't want to just drop in and say those things and be like, great, thanks for having me on the podcast. Now go deal with that. But I may be doing an Advent series. I'm going to be doing like a devotional series. There'll be a video part, but there's also a booklet you can get. And that's just kind of digging into this idea of immigration and the Bible and the idea of what is our history. It's called Holy Stranger, which centers on Jesus himself.
Amen.
Yeah, so I just want to invite you to check that out as well.
Great.
What a better time of year to do that.
I know that's right. Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you, Lizzie, for that. I appreciate it. And I'm sure everyone else did as well. We also appreciate Tom and Wade. We do keep them around for a reason. We're still figuring out what reason that is, but they're still here. So anyway.
To laugh at these jokes.
Yeah.
Which you don't always do, Tom. It hurts my feelings, but okay. You make fun of my shirt and shoes.
I think that's less about you and Tom and more about the definition of a joke.
Maybe so. Maybe so. So if you are listening and you want to follow up with Lizzie, by all means, check out JFon. If there's anything else you want to touch base with us about to help find a Christ-like response to, let us know. That's what we're here for. We want to be able to talk Jesus. We want to be able to talk our life together because this is what we have. Amen. So we appreciate you tuning in, whether it's on Facebook, YouTube, whether you're just listening and you're missing out on this wonderful $3 Walmart shirt that I'm wearing. That's on you, but okay. But Tom, Wade, Lizzie, thank you so much for the gift of your time. Thank you all for listening, and we will see you next week. God be with you.
Amen.
Thanks, John.